This starts from another conversation I had with a friend of mine. We had talked a while about the 1 to 10 scale when it comes down to attractiveness or quality of a partner, and I proposed something different. My idea was that you assign yourself 100 points. That is, each individual person is 100 points. Obviously, one person is not going to be equal to another person on this, but you're viewing yourself, all of the value that makes you you, as 100 points. And the likelihood that you are going to find a partner that is within what you would view as your acceptable range in comparison. That is, if you found someone that had the exact same value as you, in your opinion, you would find someone that is right around 100 points. Then, find out what you would be willing to accept, whether it's, someone that's 80 points or someone that's 130 points. Because when you compare everything, uh, mental state, intelligence, age, obviously physical attractiveness, health, resources, vocation, all that makes someone valuable as a life partner. 1 to 10 really doesn't cover it. I mean, it could, but I think this might be easier for each person, especially when we have such a huge gap between the average Joe and celebrity. I mean, you could have someone that you went to college to that's every bit as attractive as someone that ends up, or more attractive than someone that ends up being a multimillionaire in Hollywood movies. But what's attached to those people differs greatly. That is, the the trouble surrounding being a Hollywood actor, as well as all of the money and the opportunity, as compared to someone that you might have went to school with. That's probably a little bit closer to your routine in life. So, I posed the question to this friend, like, after you establish your barriers, let's say you're only willing to go down 20%, so you're willing to accept someone that's 80 points of your value, or you're only willing to go up so far. Now, why would you only be willing to go up so far? Well, I myself would only be willing to go up to like 130, 135 as compared to my value. For a very easy reason, and that is that I'm a guy, I like women, and if I have such a low correlative value as to the woman I'm with, she has no reason to stay. Like, it would be very, very hard for someone very successful, someone beautiful in all aspects that I find beautiful. It'd be very, very hard for them to convince me that they'd be willing to stay in my life if they have that much more than me. That is, if they can get better than me. I expect them to. I don't expect them to stay. I don't expect them to be loyal, so I wish not to invite that upon myself. So my cutoff is, let's say low 80, high 130, 135, unless somehow the person can convince me that they're not opportunist. Now, other people might say, they're willing to go down to 50 or 40 or 30, and many people would say, well, they're willing to go up to a million. Like, if you were a 40-year-old paraplegic woman that had terminal cancer, you might be willing to accept someone like, I don't know, Orlando Bloom, hands down, even though his market value as a person, as a life partner, eclipses your own, and that's a personal choice. But then it came down to, what's the likelihood that I posed this to my friend, what's the likelihood that I or any person is going to end up with someone that is close to their value? And he answered, without blinking an eye, pretty likely. He told me that, with studies, people are generally right around their own bracket. If you want to use the old 1 to 10 scale, 8s are generally with 7s or 9s or 8s. 5s are generally with 4, 5s or 6s, etc., etc. And I say, that's only physical attractiveness. I think that there's a lot more that goes into this, and, I've seen people woefully mismatched. People accept woefully lower. I'm not saying that they don't have standards. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. Whatever makes them happy and what works is ultimately what matters. But the likelihood that someone with my values in life, I told him, I don't think that I would end up with someone of my quality. I don't think that I would find someone of my quality, and if I did, I do not think that they would be available. And then he, stated that's largely the difference between the way he views the world and the way that I view the world. That is, I'm a pessimist, and he's an optimist. There's probably a word that closely or more closely describes his view or my view, but that's how I'm going to phrase it for now. And, I went back to him and I said, yeah, I'm a pessimist, but from my perspective, with the way that I am, I'm a pessimist for a very, very important reason to myself, and that is that, prepare for the worst, hope for the best, but, what does hope get you? If I perceive an outcome like I will never find a person of my quality, and I am wrong, then I win. In many cases where I'm wrong, it's better for everybody. If I am wrong, the world wins. So I want to be wrong. I approach pessimism from the perspective that I want to be wrong, because if I'm wrong, that means the world is a better place. I don't have an incessant need to be right, and if I'm wrong, I'm rewarded, which means I am more inclined to have a liquid view on things, change my viewpoints. If an opinion I have becomes invalid because I've been presented with better information and I've been proven wrong, I'm more likely to listen to the fact that I'm wrong, because I'm betting on bad things in reality. And if they don't exist, if they're not there, if the bad thing isn't there, then I am wide open to listening to how I was wrong. I'll give you an example correlating to what I said earlier. So a couple days went by and I thought, back to debate, when you're forced to debate an opinion that you are against. They do this in sociology class. They'd say, well, you're pro-gun or you're anti-gun. Let's say if you're pro-gun, then they'd make you debate on the anti-gun side so that you would learn what the merit of those arguments are and how it sounds to fight against your own arguments. So in this case, I rationalized, my friend's disagreement in the fact that, it's likely. I say it's unlikely or it won't happen. He says it's likely that you would end up with someone that correlates to your own value. So I went to work with the numbers. I love numbers. Now, the world's population, let's say, right around 8 billion people, and going up massively every day. I advise you check out World Population Clock. I'll put the link below the video. It is entertaining to watch because it has population, it has demographic by country, it has birth rate, death rate, all streamed in real time, or at least pseudo real time, just like usdebtclock.org. I'll put that one in the link below too, or in the description box. But 8 billion people on the planet. All right. So when I take my chunk of I'm worth 100 points, and I'm willing to accept 80 to 135. And anything, above 135, they really have to prove to me that they're not going to fly away as opportunity presents itself. So I take and I apply those requirements, shall we say, on the world population, and you realize that for each person that isn't on the far extremes of what it is to be a person, on the far extremes of identity, normal people, they can be disfigured and still be normal. Normal people can be mentally handicapped and still be normal. the median can still have, like, there's plenty of people with drug addictions, there's plenty of people with mental disorders and other addictions that aren't substance addictions. There are plenty of criminals out there. For each person that still fits within the median, outside of the extremes, there are very likely in the world 1 million other people that would enjoy life with you, and you would find it agreeable to enjoy life with them. In many cases, I'd say almost all cases, at least 2 million. And that's really whacking down the population. Because if you figure a billion is 1,000 times a million. So out of the world population, I'm saying 1 in 4,000 people. So we take a town of 4,000 people. One person in that town of 4,000 people, you would find life to be great with, they would find life with you to be great with. I don't think that's unreasonable. So that's every person that lives. You have 2 million other people that could be your soulmate. You know, the merit of a monogamous relationship has precipitated in our society the love of the one. When you find the one, you'll know. I lean more away from the soulmate. Yes, you can find your soulmate, but there are more than one out there. You know, you have someone that you fall greatly in love with and they pass away, and then you find that the next one that you fall greatly in love with. So I don't find that there could, or maybe there is, any one specific for any other person, but there are at least 2 million people available for each person out there that, you know, a life together would be great. If you're female, then chances are that number jumps to 500 million, but that's the way of the world. Supply and demand, they are the gatekeepers. Going back to the examples of finding that one person. If there are two, for me, let's say if there are 2 million people out there that I would have a great life with, and my requirements are that they're, you know, mentally and physically healthy, that they can take care of themselves, and that they're willing to add support to the relationship, not just receive support. If there are 2 million of those people out there, you know, how am I not with one if there's so many of them? Well, it's exposure. And if you're out there and you're listening and you do accept the fact that there are at least, for you, 2 million people out there that would mutually be happy life partners. You'd be happy living with them, they'd be happy living with you, you'd have a great life. Then you have to identify the barriers in between you and them, why you're not being exposed to them, why you aren't communicating with them, why you haven't met them, or why you're not together. Some of these barriers are surpassable, some of them are not. For example, that person very likely might already be married, especially if you're a person of quality and they are a person of quality, then they probably already have somebody. And that's something that, you know, you have to find out if you're willing to overcome yourself. Some people are willing to tear apart a relationship to get the half of that relationship they want. I'm not. Another example would be, I don't drink, and I don't smoke, and I don't use drugs. And by drugs, I'm not talking about necessarily medications. I'm talking about like cocaine and heroin. These are obstacles that limit my exposure in my community. Since I don't drink, since I don't smoke, since I don't do drugs, I don't meet those people, and it is most of the people in my community. Because of my beliefs, I'm not willing to cross those standards. Those are obstacles I'm not willing to overcome in order to gain exposure to the people that I could live with. There are examples of obstacles that aren't moral obstacles. Taking up music, taking up dancing, practicing and training for sports and competing athletically, even though, let's say, you're not in college or something like that. These are other things you can do that aren't a moral imposition that can increase your exposure. Getting out. If you stay at home, you're not going to find that person. So for each of you that may complain about being alone, I understand that, you know, the law has a great deal to do with it. But take time to identify what's stopping you from reaching those 2 million people that you could live with, and finding each way along the way, each obstacle along the way, and either overcoming it or putting it to a place where you will not wave.